you've got. And the third image is someone that actually does things like the technology that I talked about. Instruments.
Thank you. Thank you. So now I get to see whether everything translates technical issues-wise. So yes, I'm here to speak to you about inclusive design in digital musical instruments. And because I don't know all of you in the crowd, I thought I'd give you a little intro to me to begin with. So this is my face. I actually started out in technology as a curious musician. Then I studied to become, of all things, an audio engineer because I found that I got really engrossed in the technical side of music making. And not long after that, I did the obvious step of becoming a computer scientist. I found that I got really, really interested in specifically ways we could interact with music better. And digital technology, the Connect was just a new product out. I built a couple of hacks to make body movement into sounds. And somehow when I proposed to do that as a PhD for the University of Nottingham, they accepted me onto that program. And during my time there, in the last 3 years of research, I found a voice as an ambassador for women in tech. Women in music tech, when I was studying, I was actually, I think the figure was 2% of the industry was female or non-male. It's now 5% in audio. Woo! Progress. But there wasn't a community for that when I existed in that space. So when I came to tech and I found a Women in Tech conference and Women in Tech spaces, it was really, really like a breath for me to be able to go to places and talk about being a woman in this field. And then that led me to giving a lot of talks and finding a job as a web developer advocate with Samsung Internet. So that is me in a bit of a meandering nutshell. But today I'm here to talk to you about accessibility in digital musical instruments. So I'm going to look at what we've covered a lot today of what does it actually mean to be inclusive? What are the affordances of technology in music making? Look at the barriers that we actually need to break still and what my research has been telling us. So I've spent the last 3 years doing research on this very specific subject, and I'll hopefully share some insights with you today. So what does it mean, in my viewpoint, to be inclusive for technology designers? So first, I'm going to put 2 quotes from this article in Interactions magazine. And the first is from Emily Tate from Mind the Product, which said about building accessible products is the right thing to do. We've certainly heard about the ethical standpoints of it today, and that it's almost a moral imperative right now to be building accessible products. It opens up the market, it's fair. But I also like to think about this statement from Jonathan Lazar, which is about equivalence. We can't just make something accessible and be done with it. We actually need to understand the equivalence of that accessibility that we're giving. So making sure that everybody can access something in the same way. If it takes a sighted user 10 seconds to do something with your product, but a visually impaired person, it takes them 5 minutes to do the same task, that's not equivalent accessibility. You might be able to say that you've got the right tags or the right format, or it is accessible in some format, you've ticked the box, but you haven't actually made it usable. And that's a big problem today. And some of the things that I've looked at, certainly in trying to explain the standards and what is accessible, is the web standards. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, some of you will be familiar with them if you work in technology, in the web technology specifically. And I like these guidelines that they have around 4 distinct principles. The first is perceivable. So information and user interface components must be presentable to users in ways they can perceive. Now that's the academic version, but my version is it must not be invisible to any of their sensors, or to all of their sensors. So it must be visible in some way to a person. Then we look at operable. User interface components and navigation must be operable. So it can't require an interaction that a user cannot perform. If it does, then it's not operable for somebody. Then we have understandable. Information and the operation of user interface must be understandable. So it shouldn't be beyond the user's understanding. Somebody should be able to read the thing. The assistive language should be able to detect what is the correct language for the page and not be displaying something because it's been set to English and actually it's not pronouncing the language properly like we heard before. And then there's robust. In web accessibility, we talk about content must be being robust and must be widely available. But the be-all and end-all is that it shouldn't break easily. It shouldn't, when transformed between formats, between the ways that users access it, it shouldn't break what the thing actually is. And this is really important because 19%, according to the World Health Organization, I think a few years back, 19% of the world's population is estimated to have some form of disability at some point in their lives. Now, if you've, I know that it's been spoken about today, but the Inclusive Design Kit by Microsoft talks about when accessibility isn't a constant need in somebody's life, so maybe they don't have a condition that has affected them their entire lives. Maybe they have a broken arm, and that means they're using one hand to navigate things today. It's very flexible, a condition that impacts you. But realistically, this figure as well is 90% of reported things. So it's 1 in 5 of potential users of reported things, but there are many people that don't report because of the bias in society against it, because of the discrimination you may face, because you might not necessarily consider yourself a disabled person by the legal jargon that you've been given in a form that suggests a definition for this. So when I talk about inclusive design, I talk about considering these users throughout the entire design process, from ideation right through to product release. I'm talking about doing walkthroughs with personas that are for people with different abilities. Walkthroughs using assistive technology, which is very uncommon actually in a lot of websites. And when you go through to the keyboard focus or try and navigate something, you often find yourself in a really unexpected place on the page. And also, one thing that I really recommend is paid user testing from people with a range of accessibility requirements. So putting it in front of people, giving people a chance to access the technology and help you improve and iterate on it. And this is where I also talk about using the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit, which has been mentioned today already. So I've given you a little bit of what I feel it is to think about inclusive design. So now let's talk about the affordances of digital music making, or technology in digital music making. So digital music making kind of started its life in the 1930s when we started doing tape recording, when we started doing many things. And now we have lots of different things, from modular synthesizers to applications and things that we might consider to be a digital musical instrument. Some do the sound generation inside of perhaps an app on your phone. Some are just controllers that you interface with a piece of software to be able to create music. And some do both. But what actually we have here is that technology is opening the field in music for us to interact with music in lots of different ways. Now, for those of you who haven't seen a modular synthesizer or know what I'm talking about when I talk about this, which is kind of like your server bank, I guess, or all of the problems you might see. Some of you might be really, really feeling uncomfortable with this because of the cable mess. I know I do. And unfortunately, what's happened in music technology is a lot of the softwares have emulated this product, and in doing so, they've created coding environments that aren't necessarily the most accessible and only understandable to the people who have this knowledge of the modular synth. And some of that is trading off expertise and knowledge and accessibility in terms of getting people into a subject. But there's lots of things that we actually have now that we can interact with music beyond just this modular synthesis. So we have touchable interfaces. I've got an image here that is like of a slider bank that you might have seen on a mixing desk if you've ever been near one. And in these, we have things like sensitivity sensors that we can use to manipulate things. We have a very malleable interface. We can touch it, we can hold it, we can squish it if we want to as well in some of them. We have a kind of visual independence as well, because you feel your way around. You don't necessarily have to see it to understand it. You can just use it because it's a piece of hardware. It might not give you much clue when you feel around it, but there is a certain visual independence that it has. And also, for those who've been involved in audio tech for a longer period, they have this familiarity of a device. Perhaps it replicates a fader bank, or it looks like a keyboard, or it looks like a certain piece of equipment that has been in studios for a long, long time. And so that's a nice development in technology emulating the previous interfaces. We also have now lots of gesture interfaces. So these are things that model in-air gestures. They can be things from your smart devices that you have on your person. If anybody has a smartwatch, you can use the data from this. So wearables, anything like that. And we can work then with thresholds. So we can work a lot with adapting technology based on the minimum and maximum input value of a movement. And we can do a lot with tailoring these technologies. So this opens up something flexible, but it does pose its own problems in that it's not, there's no set scale. It's very open, it's very wide and very widely interpreted right now as to what you could do with this thing. And often when you provide something like that, people kind of go, oh, it could do all of this. And then they sit there scratching their head for ages because they don't know what it should do. And then we have applications. Again, this really, really does build on familiarity of device. A lot of young people I work with, they use an iPad as their touch device to communicate with if they're non-vocal. And so giving them an app that loads onto the same iPad interface that they're familiar with actually really helps them to interact with music in a new way when they wouldn't necessarily be able to. And some of these are generative audioscapes, so they don't require as much input. They can be very freeform. You can set them to keys. It can be a really nice way, especially in autistic spectrum, to experience music and generate music without being solely reliable to do things on time or not get distracted if you've got ADD like I do and look at the pretty thing over there whilst you're meant to be doing a thing over here. And that leads to some kind of gamification, which can make it more engrossing. And you can also, as I said, integrate it with the assistive technologies that they already have. But what I'm finding is a problem with a lot of these interfaces is, what does the technology actually tell the user? Does it tell them how to interact with it? There are a lot of apps that I will load and it doesn't give any walkthrough, any guidance, and it's kind of an exploration. How soon can they interact with it? One of the biggest problems I have in the music sessions I run is I spend 50% of my time setting things up, checking levels, making sure things haven't disconnected. What kind of sound will it make? Who looks at an iPad and knows what kind of sound it's going to make? I mean, other than the Apple sound set, which, by the way, they spend a lot of time designing those things. So, and there's this idea of seeing versus feeling. How do I know from what I'm touching what it's going to do, and how can I, is it completely reliable on a visual interface? And if that's the case, then it's not fully accessible. What can be changed about the thing that I'm interacting with? Can I change the settings if I've loaded it? All of these things I'm not told from the get-go. Then it becomes a whole experience of having to work around lots of things. And I can tell you the number of hacks I've built for things to just work with young people with different abilities. And this is the biggest thing I find that I never really can get told by a piece of technology is, what can't it do? What does it not do? What can I not spend hours going down a rabbit hole on a forum trying to find out if it does do this synchronizing thing that the other music technology that I have does? Where is it managing that expectation? And this is where we come into a lot of what barriers I face. So there are so many of these in music technologies for people with accessibility requirements. The first of this is non-visual interaction. A lot of things are based on apps, or specifically in music tech, we like to use a lot of neon colors and lights because that's cool. So you'll find interfaces that rely solely on lights to indicate whether things are playing or about to play or flashing to show you that they're on. And that is more or less useless to a non-sighted user. There's also multiple user requirements for these things. I work in classrooms with young people, and there is no one-size-fits-all. Everybody has a different ability. Everybody interacts with things in different ways. There's different devices, networks, OSs, orientations is one of them as well. So where am I positioning it? Can it stand on a stand? All of these things that I'm having to think about when I'm just trying to get somebody to use a piece of technology. And then when you start making music, you have to think about, how am I making a score that everybody in the group can understand? How am I creating a common understanding with the direction? How are we facilitating a performance as an orchestra as opposed to an individual? And that leads to there being lots of roles that change throughout the process. But I can tell you my biggest barrier to date, and you're probably all very familiar with this one: the Wi-Fi. My God, if I can't get something on the Wi-Fi. We performed at the BBC Proms with an orchestra of 19 young people, and that relied on iPads that we couldn't have wired. We normally had them wired because it's a bit of a safer bet, but we couldn't have them wired because of the way that the stage was set up at the Proms. And we had a Wi-Fi network, and that Wi-Fi network was called Able Orchestra, and 6,500 people came into the audience and tried to connect to Able Orchestra. And our Wi-Fi went down 2 minutes before our live set, and we were all on stage trying frantically to reconnect the devices. And it's not that it's a problem for us or will make us look bad, but it's a problem because it breaks the causality for the young people who are performing. If they can't hear their sound in there, and they don't know what's happening, and maybe their device has dropped out, it's then a complete sense of, oh, it's disappointment. It's loss of interaction. And yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit now about the research that I did, so what the stuff the data is telling us. So this is a bit of an overview of what I did in this study. So I took a group of students with a range of abilities, aged up to 19. I think the youngest I worked with was about 6, 7. We had 5 intensive days in workshops with them where we take found sounds from their wheelchairs, we record stuff, we take and test loads of different technologies. Then we record some parts, we create scores, and we create some section notes, and we make a mix in Ableton, which is a digital audio workstation software, where we can then mix all the different parts in. And then that's all working towards a final live performance. So we have solo parts, but also some of the recorded parts as backing. Everything that we do has been created by the young people in the workshops. And what I found in doing these is that there are certain points that technology needs to cope with. The first of these is that there are 3 distinct interaction modes. We have the creation phase, we have a practicing phase, and we have a performing phase. And there are different demands on the technology in each of these stages. So in creating, we want it to be quick to set up. We want it to be able to maybe key lock it. We want to tailor it to the individual, but we want this process to be fast so that we can get making music as soon as possible. In practicing, we need it to be reliable. We need it to always have a preset, perhaps, that we can load to save us time. We want it to not mistrigger or get stuck in a loop or have areas of its interface that a user accidentally hits, and that means it's broken or stops or decides to. One of our students managed to record a loop on the iPad just going around, and we're like, where is the sound coming from? Because we'd stopped every device in the room. And it was because they'd recorded this loop, a complete happy accident. It was actually a really good loop. But we were flummoxed, and that took 10 minutes or 20 minutes out of our day in these cycles. And then in performance, what can I rely on? Will the internet go down, and will that break our entire performance? Is there a way that I can manage around that? Is there something that I can do to network the devices better? And then there was also this idea that we have 2 interaction cycles. One is between the audience, the performer, and the other performers on stage, the ensemble. And then there is this hidden one between the performer, the ensemble, and the person who's facilitating the technology, who's watching over the shoulder, who's making sure everything goes right. At the Proms, I was sat hidden under somebody's wheelchair because I needed to be that close to the laptop to make sure that the tech probe that we had in there didn't break. And I didn't want to be seen by the audience. The best day that I do my job is when nobody knows I've done it, because then it's working and everything is keeping that integrity of the performer's performance. And we also introduced this idea that we have stakeholders. So we have the performer. My R is broken on here, but we have the facilitator, we have the ensemble, and we have the audience. Sorry about the typesetting there. But we have all of these people that the technology needs to consider in this space. So when you're designing for accessibility, it's not about just the accessibility of a specific user, it's the accessibility for all of these people to work in synergy together. And there really is, as many people have said today, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And I found that providing options and tailorability is key. And it really, really helps if you're building technology with accessibility as a foundation and not a feature. When you build it as a feature to add on later, you already have an accessibility debt where there's parts of your program that don't work because you didn't build it in as a foundation. Now, you can do that and you can recover from it, but it's better if you do bake it in at the foundations of your product build. So for me now, I'm working on bringing this all together in a large PhD thesis, which I aim to finish this year. This partly is, the framework is part of the output from that, which is facilitating access to musical experiences, where I'll write about all of this. I'm also building a web community for accessible instruments, so where you can find instruments that are suited to different abilities, and building a community around this so that people can actually share the knowledge and we can have better interactions all around. This means exploring the tailoring of digital musical instruments and trying to also understand if there is such a thing as a taxonomy of musical gestures when we're talking about technology today. And that has led me to work with industry partners and research collaborations, which I'm really, really grateful. And also, you. If any of you are in this room and you want to come talk to me about this, I have a group who are going to be testing the community for me. Even if you're not making music yourself and you just want to understand whether the guidelines I'm writing would be understandable to you, any testing will help me in this research project. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you, and let's build better things.